first presentation, which is improving interactions with the police. And we have a presentation here delivered by Vicki Gibbs, who's the National Manager at ARCAP, and Emma Gallagher, who's an autistic woman, autism consultant, as part of Aspect Research and Aspect Practice. Okay, I'll play the video, and please remember, feel free to ask any questions, and do let us know, particularly if you have a question for one specific presenter. Thank you.
So in this presentation, Emma and I are going to describe the development of an online training module for Australian Police that was based on research findings and co-production. I'm going to describe the research study before handing over to Emma, who will talk about how the training module was developed. The aim of the research study was to investigate the nature of police interactions in Australia as perceived by autistic adults and parent carers of individuals on the spectrum of any age. We wanted to understand how an individual's autism might impact on their interactions with police, and we wanted to use the information from our research to inform the development of autism training for Australian police. The specific research questions that we sought to answer were: in what contexts are autistic people interacting with police in Australia? How do autistic adults and parent carers perceive these interactions? Do autism-related characteristics impact the interactions? And what do Australian police officers need to know about autism and autistic people? 50 autistic adults and 65 parent carers of autistic children and adults completed an online questionnaire. We gathered demographics and diagnostic information, along with information pertaining to the autistic person's interaction with police in the previous 5 years. This included the type of involvement, whether they were a suspect, a witness, a victim, whether they were seeking assistance from police or a traffic-related incident. We wanted to know whether autism was disclosed to police at the time, and also the level of satisfaction with the interaction. For autistic adults only, we included a measure of perceived procedural justice, and this is a measure of an individual's perception of fair and just treatment. We conducted interviews with a subset of adults and parent carers to gather more detailed information about particular interactions so that we could analyse the narratives and look for instances where an autistic person may have had their autism play a role in that interaction. We also asked for suggestions as to how the police encounter could be improved. We found that the most common type of involvement reported by autistic adults was as victims of crime. Most of these interactions involve crimes against the person, such as physical or sexual assault. Asking police for assistance and providing information to police as witnesses of crime was also common amongst the adult group. The most common type of involvement reported by parents and carers was seeking assistance from police. And the majority of those who did report that they were seeking assistance from police reported that they did so multiple times over the 5-year period. These findings were interesting to us because most of the research to date in relation to interactions between autistic people and police has very much focused on offenders and offending behaviour and its relationship with autism, rather than looking at victims or victimisation of autistic people. In terms of satisfaction with police interactions, there was a significant difference in satisfaction scores for autistic adults compared to parent carers. Parent carers in general reported higher satisfaction scores than adults. The majority of autistic adults reported being dissatisfied or very dissatisfied with their interactions with police. For adults, disclosure of diagnosis, type of involvement, and whether or not they had a mental health condition wasn't related to their satisfaction. However, higher scores on the measure of perceived procedural justice were. This indicated to us that autistic adults who felt that they'd been treated respectfully and fairly were more likely to be satisfied regardless of the context of the interaction. About half of the parent carers were satisfied or very satisfied. For that group, the type of involvement was associated with satisfaction level, with those seeking assistance from police were more likely to have higher satisfaction than those whose children or adult children had interacted with police in other contexts. In addition, parents whose children or adult children had co-occurring mental health conditions were less likely to report being satisfied with police interactions. On most occasions, autistic adults reported that they didn't disclose their autism to police. Many perceived that police would either not know what autism was, or if they were aware of autism, they were more likely to view them in a negative way. Many believed they could possibly be viewed as aggressive or prone to violence because of the way autism is sometimes portrayed in the media. Parents were more likely to disclose their child's autism or to report that their adult child had disclosed autism to police. Many parents feared how police might interpret their child's behaviour and react to their child if they didn't inform them about their child's autism. When we analysed the interview data, it indicated that in 54% of the 39 interactions that were described to us, the person's autism had caused the interaction or led to the interaction with police. In 82% of the interactions, the individual's autistic characteristics impacted the interaction in some way by affecting the behaviour or capacity of the person or affecting the conduct of police. This slide shows how a number of autism-related characteristics listed on the left either directly led to an interaction with police or impacted the interaction. The instances where it led to police are highlighted in blue and the impacting the interaction is highlighted in orange. Incidents where autistic characteristics led to police involvement included examples where police were called to provide assistance by parents or carers when their autistic son or daughter was either having a meltdown or had wandered. Examples of how autistic characteristics impacted the interactions frequently related to communication difficulties, where the autistic person had misunderstood the police and also where they believed they'd been misunderstood by police. Difficulties with literal interpretation of language was often involved in these types of cases. There was also a number of instances where autistic mannerisms were incorrectly attributed by police as aggression, non-compliance, or even indicative of substance use. So based on the information we gathered from this study, we developed some key recommendations in relation to the content for a training module for police. Firstly, it's important that police are aware of the way in which a person's autism can play a role in interactions, both leading to police involvement and frequently impacting the way the interaction plays out. Autistic people can be at a disadvantage without some understanding and accommodation where possible on the part of the police. Secondly, it's really important that police are equipped with effective ways to enhance communication with autistic people and are also aware of the ways in which they can adjust their approaches so that they take into account autistic information and sensory processing differences. Now I'd like to hand over to Emma, who's going to talk you through the process that we underwent to develop the training module itself. Thanks, Emma.
Thanks for that, Vicki. So I'm here to talk about how the training module was developed for police and some of the co-production elements that went into developing the training module. So in terms of co-production elements, well, the first element of co-production was the research, in that autistic researchers were involved in the conduction of the research and also in hearing firsthand stories from autistic people and their families. The second element of co-production was the involvement of the working party. So the working party involved representatives from serving police, police learning and development team, a parent of an autistic child who was also a police officer, an autistic adult, and also members of the research team. And the final element of co-production that went into the development of this training module was the Autistic Development Group, which consisted of 4 autistic adults, a member of the research team, and the video production company. So the working party decided on the optimal delivery mode, so making sure that it was online, interactive, and also included a web page accessible via a QR code for quick access for police when they're in the field. And they made decisions regarding the content. So ensuring that the content was relevant for police, the best ways to ensure buy-in from police, and how to ensure that there was a broad range of autistic identities and behaviours being represented by the training module. The Autistic Development Group, of which I was a part, workshopped the scripts for the interactive component. And these scripts focused on coming up with scenarios, so real life scenarios that would be relevant to everyday policing. We made sure to ensure the scenarios avoided stereotyped and acted out representations of autism, as this is a common issue in media and we didn't want to perpetuate these stereotypes. We also made sure that they were relevant to the autistic and policing communities and covered a broad range of representation of autistic behaviours, abilities and identities. The Autistic Development Group were fully involved in the video production. So there were 6 autistic adults that were involved in the video production. And these 6 autistic adults shared genuine stories and descriptions about their own experiences. And these people represented a diverse range of backgrounds and abilities. 3 of these autistic adults also participated in filming of scenario situations to allow police to apply some of their newly gained knowledge and test their knowledge against a set of questions. So this is an example from the actual police module developed. We're going to go through my scenario that I filmed as part of this training module. So during this module, police will click through a series of activities and watch a video, and I'm going to show that video to you now.
Do you know why I pulled you over today?
No.
Okay, you're actually driving really erratically. You were braking a lot. Can you tell me why you were doing that?
The speed limit's 70. I was trying to stay at 70.
Okay. Have you been drinking today?
Yes.
Okay. What have you been drinking?
I had some Coke.
Okay.
So once the police have watched a video of a common interaction, this is actually a real life story from my own interaction with police where I misunderstood the "have you been drinking" question and took it literally. Police are presented with questions about that scenario to test their knowledge. So in this example, they're asked if there was anything in my behavior in that video, which may indicate that I'm on the autism spectrum. And they can choose, as I'll demonstrate here, some of the things that they've already learnt about that said that I might have been on the autism spectrum. So communication difficulties, repetitive body movements, poor eye contact, sensitivity to lights and noise, and seems unaware of social rules. And once that's done, the police can submit their answers and they are given descriptions about the indicators to reinforce their learning. So as you can see from that module, it was highly interactive and allowed police to test their knowledge on a range of scenarios. Now, in terms of the adoption of the module, currently the ACT police have had more than 450 officers complete this module. There is a planned evaluation study, which will include pre and post tests of the police's knowledge with the module and a follow-up with officers 12 months later to talk about their experiences in using the module and how they've used that in real life situations and the usefulness of training in situations. This module is also currently being rolled out to the Australian Federal Police and Airport Police across the country. Queensland Police are uploading it onto their learning management system and looking at rolling it out soon. And Victoria and New South Wales Police are reviewing the module currently for upload into their own learning management systems. So this work has been made possible by the 50 autistic adults and 65 parents and carers who shared their personal experiences, and the autistic adults who contributed to the online training model. And we thank them for that contribution, and we thank you for listening.
Super. Thank you, Vicki, and thank you, Emma. That was great. This is one reason we know Emma as Coke Can Girl now as well. I know, Vicki, that you've answered a few questions already in the chat, which is fantastic. But there has been another question sent for you, which I think is a really interesting one, is that your study has gathered information from autistic people and from families. I wondered, has there been any studies that focus on the police officers themselves and their perspective of interacting with autistic people?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there have definitely been studies done around police and autism from the police officer's perspective. Most of those, though, tend to relate to their training needs or their experiences of training. So, for example, you know, rolling out a training program, not in Australia, none at all. This is the first study focused on this area in Australia, but in the US and the UK, they've rolled out a number of training programs and, you know, asked police and tested police before and after. So that's the extent. There was one study in the UK where they went a little bit broader than that and asked them about their experiences, mirroring some of the things that we talked about from the police perspective. And that was interesting in that the police in general were more confident and more satisfied with the way they felt they dealt with autistic people than the autistic parents and autistic adults from that same community who were asked. So it seemed there was a bit of a mismatch between, you know, police feeling that they did know how to handle it and had handled it well, but the people in that community not feeling the same way. But in that same group, the police did acknowledge still that they wanted training and wanted more training.
Yeah, thanks, Vic. I know there's a question here just about the QR code for quick access. Either of you might be able to answer this. What does this give people access to?
Look, it takes them to Aspect's webpage where really there is, we've got a webpage dedicated to this topic and it's really very basic information. So I think everyone understands in a 30-minute module, there's really only going to be a few kind of key points you can get across. And we were focusing on what might help police identify autistic people and what were some key strategies for helping with communication and kind of keeping things calm. So on that web page, we've really just got those 2 points and some bullet points with the idea that if a police officer was being called and they had that on their phone, they can just kind of prompt themselves quickly. Sure. Situation.
Yeah, good. I think one last question, which was, is there any applicability of this research to other areas but beyond policing? And I wondered, Emma, given your role in Autism Friendly, whether you might sort of see this operate in other areas.
Yeah, so the participating in the training has been a really good learning experience for me. Part of my role in Aspect is actually working with the Autism Friendly team, and we go out and train organisations, businesses, government departments, and a lot of other things to be more autism friendly. And I've pulled elements from this research, especially when dealing with things like airport security and train station security and things like that, to make sure that I include what we found in this research module in the training that we then deliver to these organisations. And I did answer a question in the Q&A box along similar lines about Victorian transport.
Fantastic. Thanks, Emma, and thanks, Vicky.